All right, so we'll go ahead and get started this afternoon. So thank you again for joining us on this fine and wonderful afternoon. It's been a beautiful day out here thus far, so we appreciate each and every one of you being out here. Our first speaker this afternoon on our keynote addresses is Dr. Mary Center. She's the director of Central Michigan University Center for Applied Research and Rural Studies. And Dr. Center conducted the community survey that we put out through our community and other tribal communities to talk about the use of the land and the buildings here on the MIBS property. So if everyone could please help me in welcoming Dr. Mary Center. She would explain her results and her findings. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here. And you know, I was on one of the tours, and it was so very fascinating that at 1:28 I said to Colleen Green, who was leading the tour, you know, I really want to stay with you and finish the tour, but I'm supposed to be one of the speakers. What do you think I should do? And she said, Mary, for heaven's sakes, leave. And I should have known that. You know, I've taught for a long time, and I do know you can't be late for your own classes. So I'm very happy to be with you. But you know, one of the questions that came up on the tour, and it came up more than once, was the question, what is going to happen to the buildings that are still remaining? Are they going to be repurposed? Are they going to be used for other things? Are they just going to be left as is, or is it going to be necessary to take them down? And of course, the Tribal Council and the MIBS committee has been asking those same questions. And this will be a very difficult decision for Chief Cloutier and the Tribal Council to make. But what I was asked was to work with the MIBS committee, and Dr. William Cross is the MIBS project consultant, to work with the MIBS committee and Dr. Cross to create a survey to learn what the community thinks should be done with the buildings, if they can be maintained, or what should be done with the land if it's necessary for the buildings to be taken down. So for my remarks this afternoon, I'm going to begin with thanks, miigwech, and I'm going to end with thanks. And the reason I want to begin with thanks is this survey project really brought together people and offices throughout the Saginaw Chippewa tribal community. And part of the reason for that is because we made the survey itself available to people in 3 different formats. You know, people don't really enjoy doing surveys. They're not a lot of fun. So what we tried to do was make it very easy for people to respond. So one format was a print survey, and a large number of people completed it that way. But we depended on Matt Wright, who works for the Tribal Observer, and he took my not particularly beautiful Word file, and he created a lovely page. It was beautifully designed, that appeared in the Tribal Observer, the survey, and then we printed it out on large pieces of paper, and it was available throughout the community. But this print survey had to be distributed to people and then had to be collected. And the staff at Zeba Wing, especially William Johnson, Mr. Willie here, and Anita Hurd, and Robin Spencer, and of course Shannon Martin, were so very helpful, both in distributing the survey and then collecting it. And they introduced me and allowed me to come to the Veterans Day dinner and the Eagle Feather Feast and the Elders Breakfast at Anjawad. And I'm sure some of you who are sitting here today completed the survey at one of those lovely events. And let me just apologize to you if you were one of those people, because here you were trying to eat breakfast or trying to eat dinner, and I appeared with this survey and some pencils, and I said, I know you're trying to eat dinner, but would you mind filling out this survey too? So people were very kind and put up with me in that way. Dan Gahagan, who works for the IT department for the tribe, put the survey online, and some Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribal members preferred to take the survey that way, but they needed their tribal logon certification. And then my own staff at CMU, we made the survey available on the web as well. So we had different approaches, but it really depended on the collaboration of all of these people. And then the other person, I haven't seen him today, so I don't know if he's here, but Joe Samick was really the one who helped glue all the pieces together. If you look at his business card, it says photojournalist, tribal observer, but he spent a lot of time taking me by the hand and introducing me to people and making sure I was in the right place at the right time. So I certainly want to thank him as well. So at any rate, we had these 3 different formats for the survey. There were 140 members of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe who responded. There were 18 descendants of the tribe, 52 members of other tribes, and there were 120 other community members. But I do want to mention the other tribes who were represented, because you've heard from a number of people this morning that the boarding school was not just in Mount Pleasant, and it wasn't just Saginaw Chippewa tribal members who were forced to be students there, but we had people from Bay Mills, from the Cherokee tribe, the First Nation Ottawa of Canada, the Gun Lake Potawatomi, the Hannahville Indian community, the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians, the Nottasepi Huron Band of the Potawatomi, the Pokagon Band of the Potawatomi, the Sault Ste. Marie Chippewa, the Walpole Island folks. And these are all folks that were visiting Mount Pleasant and were kind enough to complete the survey. Now, one issue that, of course, is very important, especially on today, the day for honoring, healing, and remembering, is to think about the number of children, the number of families that were affected by the boarding school. And I have a notion that many of you won't be surprised. It kind of took my breath away. But in terms of the folks who responded to the survey, fully 2/3, 66% of Saginaw Chippewa tribal members had a family member who attended the boarding school. And when we look at the Saginaw Chippewa descendants, it was almost 90% of those folks who responded to the survey who said that one of their family members was a student here. And looking at the other tribes, those folks from 15 other tribes, almost half of those individuals, even though they were from all over the state and the Midwest, almost half of other tribal members who responded had a family member who was a student here. So this morning, if you were able to be here, there was a ceremony where people wore around their neck a name of a student who was here and the student's age. And I think we have that tendency to think of the children who were here, and we freeze them in time, thinking they were 8 and 10 and 12 and 15. So we think of those children as sons and daughters, and of course they were sons and daughters. And we think of them as sisters and brothers, and of course they were sisters and brothers. But they are also the beloved ancestors of many of you who are sitting here today. We asked people in the survey who had relatives who were students here, how were those folks related to you? And there were great grandparents, and there were grandmas and grandpas, and there were great aunts and great uncles, there were aunties and uncles, there were cousins. So the boarding school not only affected the children as children, but affected their families. It affected, of course, communities. And this is the day for remembering that. Now, the purpose of the survey was to find out people's opinion about using the land and using the buildings. The buildings, if it was possible to maintain them. And we asked people 6 questions about the use of the buildings, if the buildings could, in point of fact, be maintained. And there was strong support for using the buildings in 3 ways. And those 3 ways were using the buildings for a boarding school museum, using the buildings as a cultural preservation and language revitalization center, and using the buildings as a healing center. And of course, those uses are compatible. A museum, a cultural revitalization center, a healing center. And again, those were the 3 uses of the buildings that received wide support. Now, there were 3 other uses of the buildings that were suggested, but while there wasn't strong opposition, there was certainly much less support. And those 3 were using the buildings for a skilled trade center, for a tribal college, or for a charter school for middle and high school students. But this was making the assumption that the buildings could be preserved, and it's not at all clear, as you know, whether that's going to be possible. So there were 2 questions that asked people if it was necessary for the buildings to be removed. If that was necessary, how would you like the land used? How would you like the land used? And here, once again, there was a strong opinion that came through. In fact, the highest percentage of people said that they would like the land used to construct a memorial wall with the names of the children who were students here inscribed in the wall. So strong support for that, and actually very little opposition. The other question dealing with the land, if the buildings had to be removed, were just to leave the land as land, to turn it into or have it remain as landscape green space. And there was much, much, much less support for that, just, if you will, leaving the land alone. Now, one other finding that I think is really important to stress is that all groups had similar opinions. Now, what do I mean, all groups? There were the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribal members. There were the descendants. There were the other tribal members, and there was the non-native community. And what I just summarized for you, those findings hold for all those 4 groups. In addition, I thought, well, maybe people who did have family members, those many people who had family members who attended the boarding school, maybe they would have different opinions than folks without those family members. But that's not the case. So whether or not you had a family member, opinions were the same. I thought that people who perhaps had given a lot of thought, had thought most about the use of the land and buildings, might have a different view from people who were concerned but had given the issue less thought, and that wasn't the case. And I thought maybe elders in the community would have different views than younger people, and that wasn't the case either. So the good news, though I'm sure this will be a very difficult decision for the tribal council, but the good news is that people tend to agree, if the buildings can be preserved, what to use them for, and people tend to agree, if it's necessary to take the buildings down, how should the space be used. But there was a final question that was an open-ended question. What I've reviewed for you so far forced people to check a box, forced people to put themselves in a box. And of course, people do that on surveys, but for such an important issue, having to agree or disagree or say yes or no doesn't fully capture necessarily your opinion. So the question was, do you have other suggestions, in your own words, do you have other suggestions about how the building and land should be used in the future? And people had a wide variety of suggestions: apartments, housing for seniors, a homeless shelter, many different views. But I want to read you a few of these open-ended comments because they're so poignant and they focus so much on our theme today. And I'm going to read you a few from Saginaw Chippewa tribal members and then a few from other folks. So this is from a Saginaw Chippewa tribal member. After ensuring that there are no more ancestral remains undiscovered to be found on the property, there needs to be an internal cleansing of the buildings, as the spirits that still remain inside those buildings need peace. Then those buildings need to be torn down so that the pain and misery that lay deep in the foundations of those buildings are released. Then I agree with the remembrance wall. Maybe place a new building there, not on the original building site, and put up a museum to teach others to learn from their mistakes so that these atrocities are never again repeated. Mount Pleasant people need to finally understand what happened there, the truth, the reality. Here's another comment. I'm just going to read you a few. Another comment from a tribal member, and you'll see how eloquent these are. I feel the boarding school building should be torn down and a new building in its place. It's not the buildings that should be left as a monument, but the emphasis of those children who sacrificed greatly should be remembered. A memorial stone wall with MIB students' names would be appropriate, especially with the many sculpturing artists we have among our tribe. Just a couple more from the tribe. Something to show everyone and educate everyone on what happened there being here. Landscaping would delete it completely from history, and that terrifies me. With perseverance, we, members of the tribe, with perseverance, we are still here. And finally, from a tribal member, using the buildings and land to go towards a good education would honor what our ancestors wanted for our people, but doing it the right way would be a real honor. Many of our people don't need other skills to build success, but this use of the land would be beneficial. Then again, a few comments, not quite as many, from people who are not members of the Saginaw Chippewa tribe. I think we need more than a memorial. We need a place where we can focus on reconciliation with Native Americans, a place where we white people can issue a heartfelt apology and work toward building trust. From that place of peace, perhaps a community center could be built. Another from someone who's not a Saginaw Chippewa tribal member, but maybe a descendant or another tribal member. Keep the buildings as much as possible. This is historically significant. There is much white America can and should learn from this history. Make this a special place to honor the past, respect nature, and learn. Make it a quiet place, a peaceful place. The Zebewing Center is such a wonderful place. It makes a good model. Two more. A place of peace. That's what this should be. A place of peace to learn about the past, and even more importantly, learn how to prevent things like this in the future. A place to preserve history and bring all races together in peace. Maybe start with the differences in the past, then focus on what brings us together. Finally, the ideas presented in this survey All are excellent testaments to the value in knowing our history, while two, never forgetting those we lost and ensuring it never happens again. Thank you for the opportunity to respond. This was to the survey. And I want to close by thanking the Tribal Council, the MIBS Committee, the 339 people who responded to the survey for letting me be part of this project. Thank you for that. I've felt on the projects that I've worked with tribal members on that I have taken more than I've left with you, and I certainly have learned more than I've taught. So miigwech, chi miigwech, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Dr. Center, for those words and for the commitment you've made to the tribe. If I could have everyone's attention, just as a reminder, if we're in the tent, if we could tone down the voices here, they're echoing and carrying quite a ways. So to make sure that we're respectful to our speakers up here this afternoon, I would just ask that if you're going to speak, we go outside of the tent. Thank you, guys. Our next speaker this afternoon is a familiar face to us. He is our curator at the Zebewing Center, and Mr. William Johnson is going to come up and speak about the nomination for the National Register of Historic Places. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Willie Johnson.
Well, thank you, Eric. So now we get the test, and I'm going to test you on everything that Mary just said. All right? So for those of us that were talking amazingly loud, you know what I'm saying? First of all kidding aside, let's give another hand to Mary because she worked very hard on this survey to our tribal community for the use of the land and the buildings. And, there were times when we would have to tell Mary, Mary, please sit down and eat, because she was working so hard on our behalf. And we're most thankful for all the work that she's done. But we have some housekeeping to do. And if you bear with me, we're going to do that. Today we had opportunity, Zach Jackson and Abby Noddy went through all the students that perished while they were attending the boarding school. And we heard approximately 235 names this morning. Many of the tribes that they represent went unknown. So we're going to see if we can get through some tribes today. And if you were a member of those tribes, give us your best shout out, okay? And we're going to see how many tribes are represented within our Honoring, Healing, and Remembering event today. So if you hear your tribe, shout it out, eh? All right. Absentee Shawnee Tribe of Indians of Oklahoma. Bad River Band of the Lake Superior Tribe of Chippewa Indians of the Bad River Reservation in Wisconsin. Well, there we go. See there? That's Ray. That's got to be Ray. Bay Mills Indian Community. The Boise Fort Band, the Net Lake of the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe of Minnesota. The Chippewa Cree Indians of the Rocky Boys Reservation in Montana. That's our old friend, Alvin Windy Boy. That's where he's from. He's an old friend, and he's an amazing gentleman. And we can't forget their tribal elder, Duncan Standing Rock Sr. How about the Citizen Potawatomi Nation of Oklahoma? The Delaware Nation of Oklahoma. Any Delawares in the house? How about the Delaware Tribe of Indians, the Delaware Tribe of Eastern Oklahoma, and the Delaware Tribe of Indians in Oklahoma? There's 3 Delaware tribes, and many of them could have attended our school. Eastern Shawnee Tribe of Oklahoma. The Fond du Lac Band of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe in Minnesota. We're going to go through all these, so be patient with me. Forest County Potawatomi community, and they're in Wisconsin. The Grand Portage Band of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe in Minnesota. The Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. Louder than that, please. There we go. I said we're loud and we're proud today, right? Remember. Hannahville Indian Community. Keweenaw Bay Indian Community. All right, there you go. Oh. The La Croix de Rey Band of the Lake Superior Chippewa Indians. Hey, Mr. George Martin in the house. The Lac du Flambeau Band of the Lake Superior Chippewa Indians of the Lac du Flambeau Reservation of Wisconsin. Anybody? Got some in the back. Okay. Lac Vieux Desert Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians. All right. Leech Lake Band of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe. Little River Band of Ottawa Indians. Oh, sneaking up on us. Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians. Machi Beneshewish Band of Potawatomi, the Gun Lake tribe. One. The Menominee Indian tribe of Wisconsin. Mr. David Greeno is our friend with the Menominee Indian tribe of Wisconsin. Miami tribe of Oklahoma. The Mille Lacs Band of the Minnesota Chippewa in Minnesota. Nottawasepi Huron Band of the Potawatomi. Whoa. The Ottawa tribe of Oklahoma. Peoria tribe of Indians of Oklahoma. Pokagon Band of Potawatomi Indians. We're Three Fires, right? We're glad you guys are on our side. The Prairie Band of the Potawatomi Nation. The Quachin tribe of the Fort Yuma Indian Reservation in California and Arizona. These folks are aboriginal to the state of Michigan as well. And they ended up in California and Arizona, of all places. The Red Cliff Band of the Lake Superior Chippewa Indians of Wisconsin. Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians in Minnesota. The Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska. The Sac and Fox Nation of Oklahoma. The Sac and Fox tribe of the Mississippi in Iowa. That's a mouthful. Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe of Michigan. Thank you. Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. Whoa, all right. The Seneca and the Cayuga tribe of Oklahoma. The Seneca Nation of Indians. And they're also known as the Seneca Nation of New York. We're getting there.
My grandson belongs there.
Okay. We've got the grandson representing the Seneca Nation of Indians today. Shawnee Tribe, Oklahoma. The Sokogan Chippewa community in Wisconsin. All right. St. Croix Chippewa Indians of Wisconsin. The Tonawanda Band of Seneca. Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians of North Dakota. The White Earth Band of the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe. and the Wyandot Nation. Those are 50 tribes that are aboriginal to the state of Michigan, and most likely many of them had students here at the school. So thank you for everybody for allowing me to read all our wonderful Michigan tribes. We thank the Pokagons, they were loud and proud.
Life's too short not to be Caucasian.
All right. I love it. I'm Pokagon today, by the way. We're gonna go back in time because we have a lot to be proud of here, and I'm gonna read from my little piece of paper, so bear with me. On Tuesday, May the 3rd of 2016, our state of Michigan Governor Rick Snyder and Michigan State Historic Preservation Officer Brian D. Conway recognized the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan, Central Michigan University, and the city of Mount Pleasant with a 2016 Governor's Award for Historic Preservation. All right, we won the Governor's Award for Historic Preservation at this very site, okay? And, hold on. This award was given for documenting the history of the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School through an ongoing program of archaeological research and outreach initiatives that promotes healing and understanding of the lives of our boarding school students. And that's what we won the award for. So everybody, come on. And Dr. Sarah Surface Evans of Central Michigan University is our principal investigator. So Dr. Sarah, where are you? Stand up. Is everybody see her? Here she comes. She's coming. There she is. And Dr. Sarah not only continues to assist the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan and all our wonderful tribal nations, but also the city of Mount Pleasant on their property as well, so that they can document the history there. And we're most thankful to her and all her wonderful students that have helped us over the years. And so we'll continue on the same day, the state of Michigan's legislature, the state government and community honored Central Michigan University, the city of Mount Pleasant, and the Saginaw Chippewa with a special tribute for the work accomplished by all those involved in the preservation of the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School. And Kevin Cotter, he was the Speaker of the House and the 99th District, and Judy K. Emmons is our state senator from the 33rd District, presented that award to us as well. So there we go. We're awesome together, right? Right? Marilene's shaking her head. Yeah, I see her over there. All right. Now we get into the good stuff. As if that wasn't awesome. All right. On January the 13th of this year, many of us, the Zeboink Center staff, and Dr. Sarah was with us, and Shannon Martin, our director, Michael Fisher from our planning department, we had an opportunity to travel to Lansing, Michigan, and at the State Historic Preservation Review Board meeting, we were honored with the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School being approved to the National Register of Historic Places. Yeah. Which is an amazing thing. By a vote of 7-0, the State Historic Preservation Review Board approved our nomination of the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School to the National Register of Historic Places. That's a major accomplishment. And of course, Dr. Sarah Surface Evans from Central Michigan University had a lot to do with that, as well as her wonderful students who were amazing writers and researchers assisting the Zebra Wing Center to get this work done. And without Dr. Sarah and her students' help, we probably couldn't have done it. So one more hand for Dr. Sarah and her students. She's got her cool rock and roll shades on today. So you know, she looks pretty hip. And she's crying, you know, So once again, we traveled to Lansing, and we were able to introduce ourselves in the language. Nindawe, Maganaduk, all my relations. Makade, Wase, Yamaguns, little black, shiny light, prismatic stone. Little black diamond I am. Ojibwe Anishinaabe. Ojibwe Anishinaabe. Saginaw, a king, and Donjaba. From the Saginaw, Chippewa Indian tribe of Michigan. And now Wissa Mendan we Medewian. I'm seeking the Medewian way of life. And so we opened up in the language of our ancestors as best as we could. And because we understand that our language is a sacred gift of our Creator. And we were speaking the language to honor the students that unfortunately lost the language to them. And we seen many tears in the audience that day. On April the 9th of 2013, the National Park Service formally approved the proposal of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan to assume certain state historic preservation office duties within our tribe's reservation and on tribal lands in Michigan. There's two people that need to be recognized. Charmaine Shawana, where's Charmaine? There she is. Everybody over there? Charmaine was our very first tribal historic preservation officer. And Charmaine went to travel with her husband, Zozep, to learn the language. So unfortunately, Charmaine, we lost Charmaine to learning the language, okay? And then Mr. John Graveret Jr. became our Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. So where's John? We meant to do that. So John Graveret is here. I know he's here somewhere. And John was acting as our Tribal Historic Preservation Officer as well. John is an amazing man, and he chose to assist students with learning disabilities. So John is a minority male teacher in the classroom, assisting those with disabilities, learning disabilities. And how could we keep them? You know, and we said, John, you're going to have to go take care of your business with the students, and we support you either way. And then I became the interim Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. And along with my NAGPRA duties, many NAGPRA duties, and then also assisting the Saginaw Chippewa as the curator, that makes for a full-time job, believe me. And so we have the triple threat between Charmaine, John, and myself. And now John is coming back to us as our THIPO intern. So hopefully, you know, if we cross our fingers, we'll get John to come back to us full-time as our Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. So we couldn't do this work without these wonderful people. So that's why we have to thank Charmaine and John. Historic preservation is really honestly not everybody's cup of tea, but it is an amazingly important thing. All right. So as we know, the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School is within the exterior boundaries of the Saginaw Chippewas Reservation, and that's why we take care of it. One of our primary responsibilities is to nominate eligible properties to the National Register of Historic Places, which is what we've done, right? We've already said that. Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School to the National Register of Historic Places. It's our first one. So let's move on to new things, and we'll get some more properties to the National Register. That's what we're going to continue to do. And of course, one of our primary duties is to advise and assist, as appropriate, federal and state agencies and local governments in carrying out their historic preservation responsibilities. And that's why Nancy is here. Nancy Ridley, our city manager, City of Mount Pleasant manager. Everybody? We've been working side by side on behalf of this big, entire 320-acre parcel. The City of Mount Pleasant owns the bulk of it, and the Saginaw Chippewas own a nice little chunk. And we can't forget our very own Mayor Ling. She's in the audience right there. Come on, another hand for Mayor Ling. And these guys are just amazingly wonderful people to work with. And the work sometimes gets a little difficult, but we manage to work together collaboratively and cooperatively. And we're going to continue to do that. So on October of 2010, Public Act 208 was signed into law by Governor Jennifer Granholm. You guys remember Jennifer Granholm? And she authorized the land conveyance to the City of Mount Pleasant and the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe, which is this entire 320-acre parcel that we know as the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School property. We had to walk the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Committee through an interest survey and a land conveyance survey, which we did. And then we were able to purchase the land associated with the boarding school. And on April 24th of 2011, the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Council approved the land conveyance. So everyone, you are on Indian land. Well, you guys can do better than that. You are on Indian land. And let's not forget our friends from the City of Mount Pleasant who divested some of their property to the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan. The grounds that are associated with the small girls' dorm, right, Anita, to the south of us. They donated that portion to us and the historic building that it sits on. So we're most thankful to the City of Mount Pleasant for all their kindness and caring. And we'll have opportunity to rehabilitate that building, we hope. Cross our fingers. All right. So on October of 2011, our Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Council sanctioned the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School Committee, and they've been just so awesome and working really hard, and they're putting on the annual Honoring, Healing, and Remembering event. And this place, this boarding school committee was here to transform this property to remember the Mount Pleasant Industrial Boarding School children and to reflect the historical significance. So I think we're doing that pretty good. We're here honoring, remembering, and we're healing from the devastating effects of intergenerational trauma that has come our way due to the fact that we have to remember these students because they perished while they were attending the school. So, as a part of the National Register of Historic Places application, we identified the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School. It was significant under Criterion A because it represents the U.S. federal government's policy of cultural assimilation and genocide of Native American people. Now, can we get our mind around that one? It's the only federal boarding school in the state of Michigan, and it was the principal boarding school for many tribes. And how many did we go through this morning? And we didn't even count our Canadian brethren, 50 tribes, and we didn't even count those north of our United States border. 225 Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding Schools children perished. And we had the opportunity to honor them this morning. Zach and Abby helped us with the remembrance roll call. And at this time, I would like to honor my family member, Wilson Johnson. He was only 17 years old when he perished at the school, and yeah, I think about him a lot. And then also, I have another family member, Angeline Johnson, who died at the school as well. So we're doing some good work today, and you guys are helping me heal, right? And what better way to do that but with my Anishinaabe family. So we thank you very much. All right. You guys remember President John F. Kennedy? Remember him? He happens to be my favorite president of all time. And I'm going to tell you why. Because he wrote this, what I'm about to tell you. And he said, "It seems a basic requirement to study the history of our Indian people. America has much to learn about the heritage of our American Indians, and only through this study can we as a nation do what must be done if our treatment of the American Indian is not to be marked down for all time as a national disgrace." And that was John F. Kennedy. He said that in 1963. I have to tell you my John F. Kennedy story that means so much to me. On the 50th anniversary of his death, my heart was heavy, and I was amazingly sad for weeks at a time about that. And I was praying to the Creator and to the Lord and anybody that would listen, to please take this pain away from my heart, because I feel so close to President John F. Kennedy. And then we were at work one day, and then my wife Darlene called, and she said, "Willie, there's a big, gigantic eagle in our backyard." And she called me at, would have been 2:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we know President Kennedy died 1 hour earlier in Dallas, Texas. So the eagle showed up in my backyard at the time that Kennedy passed away. And I took that as a sign from our Creator that he was thinking about me and honoring me with the spirit of John F. Kennedy and what he means to all of us. So that's a beautiful story. And yeah, I was pretty emotional that day. We have a beautiful Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School curriculum. You might have seen it over at the table where the silent auction is. And it's called The American Indian Boarding Schools, an exploration of global ethnic and cultural cleansing. Many of you are wearing the little sticker, the little Agents of Change sticker. And it tells the history of the Native American boarding school experience. Dr. Amy Lone Tree is an old friend of ours, and she's an assistant professor of American Indian Studies at the University of California in Santa Cruz. And she wrote this about our guide. And she said, "This brilliant guide developed by the Zebra Wing Center is compellingly well-written, well-researched, and pervasively argues that we must use the knowledge gained from it to work towards healing and restorative justice. And as educators, we could not hope for anything more to have a resource that helps us bring the finest in current scholarship to our classrooms, and perhaps most importantly, a resource that inspires students to become agents of change, to assist in addressing a great historical wrong, the legacy of which is still very much a part of the present." And for those that may remember last year, our very own Saginaw, Chippewa, Zachary Zamora got the boarding school into his history class, that curriculum, and he was honored by Lansing High School for being that agent of change, bringing it to the teacher's attention so that the students could learn about the boarding school era and its students. And the coolest thing about it was he got to be a keynote speaker last year. And he was amazingly nervous, but he persevered through speaking in front of everybody, and he even got his story told in and the Saginaw Chippewa's Tribal Observer. So we're most thankful to Zachary. So wherever he is today, all right. Yes. Oh. Oh. Oh, Zachary's over there. There he is. Zachary, stand up. There he is, everybody. See there? And Zachary, you know, he's a man that emulates the 7 grandfather teachings of bravery, because he was very brave that day, and he was just an amazing young man and stuff. He's the future of us, eh? And he's bringing this story into his classroom. So, have you graduated yet, Zachary?
Yeah, I graduated last year.
Last year. Hey, all right. All right. So Dr. Sarah Service Evans was able to assist us with the application for the National Register of Historic Places, because the school follows under Criterion D, which is that this property has yielded or is likely to yield information important in prehistory or history. And of course, we won that Governor's Award once again for documenting the history of the Meebs, Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School, through an ongoing program of archaeological research. And without her help, we could never get this work done. She's been, please correct me if I'm wrong, you've been on the school grounds over three seasons of archaeological investigations, and we've identified 4 archaeological resources on our property that the State Historic Preservation Office recognizes with its own unique number. So that is really awesome. Michael Fisher, he's not with us today. Michael Fisher was on our Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School Committee, and Michael is off now to, where, does anybody remember? Georgetown, of all places. He's at law school. And he said, Willie, he said, you know, he told all of us that he really would hate to step down from the boarding school committee, but he's going to go to Georgetown to study law, to become a lawyer, so he can come back to the Saginaw Chippewa and help us where we need the type of help that he'll be able to provide. Georgetown. I only read about Georgetown in books. Oh, jeez. And so anyways, Michael, the reason why I'm calling out Michael is because he spoke to the State Historic Preservation Review Board on that day, and he let them know most eloquently what the site and the designation for it means for the Saginaw Chippewa, but for all the tribes. And you guys, if you would have been there, you would have loved him. So, Pokagans, you would have loved him. Yeah. All right. So one of the people that we is not with us today is Dr. Bill Cross. Dr. William T. Cross. He's the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School Committee Project Manager. So Bill's off traveling because that's what he likes to do. And he's probably in Albuquerque somewhere. And without his effort as the project manager and working with Mary to survey the tribal community for the use of our land and our buildings, it would be hard to do. Anita is right here in front of us. Anita Hurd's our Zeboing Center Research Center Committee, or excuse me, Anita Hurd, Zeboing Center Research Center Coordinator. She's on the committee, and she knows how hard it is to do all our work at Zeboing and then attempt to assist on the committee, right, Anita? So without Dr. Bill, it would be very difficult to do. We owe so much amount of debt to Dr. Mary Center from CMU's Center for Applied Research and Rural Studies. And once again, we thank her for all her diligence on our behalf and all her strength and her resilience, working hard on behalf of the Saginaw Chippewa and all the tribes. And if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't be able to do the things that we do. So we're most thankful for her. And we are planning for the future, just to let everybody know. in regard to the boarding school, the land and the buildings, and the things that we're trying to determine is if the buildings can be rehabilitated at an affordable cost. And we also been talking about ways that we can use the building. So that's what I said, I'm gonna test you, right? So what did Mary say were the three, top uses of the buildings? Mary, you wanna hear this? Museum. Language and cultural revitalization. And a healing center. All right. Did you get it? All right, you passed the test. And then unfortunately, if the buildings have to be removed, we have to talk about, how we're going to use the property. But we're going to do our very best with Dr. Bill, to seek out funding, to do our very best to make sure that we can preserve this history as best as we can for the future generations, which you guys have saw firsthand this morning with all our tribal youth this morning, right? Yeah. We're going to shed our mortal coils before we know it. But these young people are going to learn from our awesome example. And the boarding school and the students and the whole era will be the titanium in their spine so that they can stand up, they can be proud, and they can smile, and they can be happy, and they can be healthy. Right? All right. So with that, we definitely thank everyone for your time and your attention. The Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School sits on the National Register of Historic Places.
And a Chimiigwech I know that he's a pretty humble man, but I'd like to take an opportunity to acknowledge him as our intern THIPO officer and all the work that he has done. And Willie, a lot of the things that we do, we couldn't do without you, so we appreciate that. All right, just a couple housekeeping items here. Again, this silent auction will go till 3:30 p.m., so make sure to bid on those items for this silent auction. We'll have plenty of those items still ready, waiting for winners there. The 50-50 still going as well. That will be drawn at 3:30, so make sure you guys help support Honoring, Healing, Remembering. Bid on those wonderful items and make sure you be a part of that 50-50. All right, thank you for the short break here. I'll let some folks get settled, and I know some more will come back. But in honor of everyone's time and to respect that time with the groups traveling with us, we'll move on to our next speaker. It is my privilege and pleasure to introduce Daisy Costas. She was a resident at the residential school in Canada and is a survivor of the Saginaw boarding school and would like to tell her story and some of the experiences there. So please help me in welcoming Daisy Costas up as she shares her stories with us.
Okay, is everybody ready to listen to the real story coming directly from a former survivor of a boarding school? And a lot of people that I know that went to boarding schools are never hardly have time or don't want to educate or even, talk about, the boarding school. And it seems like, it's been a hard road for many of us, that went to boarding school. We didn't want to think about it, and it was one of the hardest things that anybody could do, is to tell their story, because it, especially if a lot of nasty things happen there, with you as a student. And many of us, experienced that. that hardship of abuse, and especially sexual abuse. And I'm going to introduce myself in the language because I feel that the language is very, very important, because those were one of the things that, that was taken from us, as students. And one of the things that my grandmother told me is to never forget the language. And she was the one that encouraged me to be able to go, and someday that I'll be able to come back and help my people in many ways in the field of whether it's going to be in the law field or whether it's going to be in the teacher field or just being a mother of many children, in communities. Wabagani kwe desin kaz, waswanapi dunjaba, makwa do them. Cree First Nation Endow, James Bay, Jibamatsiwan. And I just said, my name is First Blossom Woman, and I'm from the island that overlooks the water. And my clan is the Bear. And I'm from the James Bay area, where that's a huge body of water, that's been there for many centuries, and where a lot of my people still live there, thousands of years. And so first of all, I want to introduce, our boarding school. This is our boarding school album, to say that it's like a bird rising. And that's the representative of the crane. There's a lot of crane clans up in that area. And the crane is rising to educate and reconcile, with the, through education and through the Shinwak Indian Residential School, center that's housed over the Algoma University now, is a place for us, for us former students to be able to meet there and share our stories, with the people in that area and other communities. And quite a few years ago, our whole school system with the boarding schools, they had to, the government, we had to sue the government, for what happened in the boarding schools. And to this day, it's still going on, where they hired, a group of attorneys, and also, through the school system, to come forward. And so we had to go through a program where everybody, had to, tell their story, to these people that, that came through to listen to us. And they listened to our stories, and they're all recorded. And they're, some of the stories are, there in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and also out there in Manitoba. That's kind of the headquarters where where the museum is going to be of all our stories, that were recorded, at the boarding schools. And there's over 200, boarding schools all across Canada that that we attended. And the one that I attended was, the Shinwak Indian Residential School in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. The title used in this gathering of Algoma University is what we're talking about today, and the healing and reconciling through education, and then recognizing also the rising crane. That's the one of the main kind of the main clans that went to this boarding school, and a lot of us from northern Quebec, and also out west, we came from all over, in fact, all across Canada to attend a lot of these boarding schools, and a lot of us went up to to the James Bay area. 'Cause it was called Moose Factory, and quite a few of us, went there, to start, the boarding school there, and then eventually, that school got pretty full, so we were not able to stay there, at that time, so we had to be transferred down, then to the lower part of Ontario, and they put us there at the Shinwalk Indian Residential School. And we had to be flown in from the bush, to go to school, and we had to get ready to go, and to leave our parents and our grandparents and our siblings behind, and to leave our community, to go to school. And that was one of the hardest times in my life that I could have ever done. Because I was already set, to be able to be one of the mothers of all, of the Cree kids up in that area, and the grandmother eventually probably, and be able to teach and learn, and also, do what I do now. But still, I had to go away because, because they said eventually, non-native people are going to be coming here, to take over our land. So we must have some English speaking, or even French speaking, native people, or the Cree Nation or the Ojibwe Nation, up in that area. So therefore, some of us have to go to school, to be able to do that. So we can study law, study, whatever needs to be done, study history, study of our people, and that was the plan, for us. But that didn't happen. The Shinwalk Indian Residential School, located in Sault Ste. Marie, was built in 1934, and it opened, in 1935, and it closed, and of course, in 1970. And I was long gone then by that time, and I was already here in the States. And I remember, this is the school. That's the way it looked like when I was going there. In fact, the car right in the front there, that's the principal. The principal then, Mr. Phillips. That's his car right there, and he was one of the abusers at that school. And here's a student, and it looks like me. All of us looked alike because we all wore the tunics with a white blouse, and we had our haircuts that were square block cut, at that time. And so it reminds me as I was walking up, when I landed, on the bush plain there at one of the towns there in northern Quebec, be brought in by bus, through 800 miles to Sault Ste. Marie from the town that we landed in, and I remember walking up to that school, because the bus, the roads were pretty rough then at that time, and so we had to be let off on the main road there. And then all of us students, started walking up, to that school, and we went inside. And to us, it looked like a huge castle. And the smell, it was almost like a mildew smell, when I remember walking in there, that smell of that school. And I was about 7 or 8 years old at that time, and that's about the same age as this student as you see walking up. And I remember at that time that I was quite frightened then at that time too, and it's such a huge building that I was going to be housed in. And there were pictures on the wall of all the different chiefs, that came, to that, or that were part of that school, that I was going to be educated, because I couldn't speak a word of English, and my first language is the Cree language, And so I was scared. I didn't understand. They were talking to us in the English language, and of course I couldn't understand what they were saying, and that's pretty scary when you don't understand what the people are trying to say to you in the long run. So there were pictures, like I said, along the wall of Shinwa Kunz, the pine, and he was born in 1773 and passed on in 1854. He defended the Anishinaabe people in many ways, through the 1812 to 1814 war to defend our homelands by envisioning treaties and also teaching the wigwam throughout the Anishinaabe lands of all nations all across Canada. This was the first Shinwak Indian wigwam. Oops, the other way. This one was the first teaching wigwam that was built. It was more like a mission, church kind of built by the St. John's Mission of the Ojibwe people. That was chartered by the 1832 Governor Claiborne was the person that built that teaching wigwam, and it was on Pim Hill. And I remember climbing that hill, and really didn't even know where that school was. That was built there right in Sault Ste. Marie. When I was going to school there, and Reverend William Murray of the Anglican Church and the Chief Shinwak's band in 1833 had something to do with it also then too, and helped with the building of that mission school. The Robinson-Huron Treaty was one of the first treaties that was written there for us, to use as part of a deal, with the Native people, and all the different nations, in Canada, to it was like the 1851, it was like I guess you can call it a deal to be able to trade, your land, for your students to be able to go to school. And but this trade, I would say, is to my heart would say, it wasn't a good trade. And it shouldn't have been worked that way. It should have been the other way, where the land should have been given for free, rather than and use it as a treaty, and so it was not really a true trade per se to me as a former student, because I was used as part of that system, and to take our land, from us and not be able to use it for our traditional ways of our culture, the way it's supposed to be. Because when we were going to school there at that school, we were not taught our language, and neither was our culture involved in it. It was strictly all non-native culture that we learned, and all the foods that we ate, were not the foods that we thought, were going to be the foods that we, our traditional foods, like our moose meat and our fish, and then also, the other, the beaver especially then too, that was part of our traditional foods at that time. It was created, this Robinson Treaty was created in trade to give up our lands, to create boarding schools all across Canada, and there was over 200 of them that were built. and most of the Anishinaabe people all across Canada. Over 200 schools that were built, in the lands that, that the native people lived on. So they had to move away, of course, in their lands to, so a school could be built, and that, especially the Garden River Reservation, and also the Batchewana Nation also. That was, part of their land also. Then too, they had to give up. And so here's, all the, the school and how it started, and it started as a mission school, and then, over to the St. John's Mission in Garden River, and then the other one, is just was right behind the main one that's in the bottom right there, and that's one of the old schools of the original Shinwak Indian Residential School, and this is more of the newer one. And the newer one has got some additions to it now, and it's Algoma University now, and it's been kind of been rebuilt on the extensions on the right hand side and also on the other side. So you can't really tell when you walk into that school. It has completely changed. You can't even recognize it, when you walk in there, where the dorm was, or where the dining room was, or where the playroom was. The lower part was where all our playrooms were. It was down in the lower part of that school, and the second levels were the dorms, for the junior girls, and then the upper levels were the intermediate, and also all up to the top were the senior girls, at that school. One of the common objectives in creating the residential schools system was to assimilate the Indian and Inuit children all across Canada into northern Canada. In the 1920s, Duncan Campbell Scott, deputy supervisor of General of the Indian Affairs, looked to fix the Indian problem. And Mr. Scott at this very clearly stood his mission. And I quote, "I want to get rid of all the problem. Our objective is to continue until there is not a single Indian in Canada that has not been absorbed." According to Scott and the government policy, the residential school system was designed to kill the Indian in the child. The residential school institutions that locked to entrust and civilizing the native children against they were against their will in many ways, because we didn't know how to learn the culture that we were put in. The system stripped away our identity, our language, and our culture of our indigenous ways as a people. There are very many children that were lost in their indigenous way of language and culture, attending residential schools. When they were returned home, many found that they were not able to communicate with their parents and grandparents, because the Cree language was the only language that our parents were able to speak. So therefore, the communication, we lacked, in many ways, and we had learned the ways of the non-native culture, and so therefore it was kind of a loss to our grandparents and our people up in that area of northern Ontario, all up into the James Bay area, northern Quebec, and also all the way up into the Inuit country. This picture of this just the aerial view of that that school that's there now, and it's an Algoma University now. Mr. Dan Pine Sr., 1900 to 1992, was the grandson of Shinwa Kuntz. And he was the one that, kind of brought us together as former students. He started to, we would go there to go visit the Garden River Reservation and go visit him and the other, grandfathers and grandmothers that we were getting teachings from that we had lost before. And we had to go visit, those original teachers that we were not allowed to be able to go see. And so Dan Pine was one of the grandfathers there at that time, and I quote at what he said, when one time we were meeting there, and the Shinwak school never closed, he said. It just entered a new phase of development. It has to be given a chance to finish what it started. It has to put people who went there, the people that went there, that will care. Bring the people together. Let them gather, and they will know what to do. And this was the time that as students started talking about maybe having having gatherings. Stop working. Oh, there it is. There. Yeah, there's some of our gatherings. There, our first gathering was in 1981, and I was already living here in the States at that time, and had graduated from high school, and I'm going to college at that time, and therefore I missed that first one in 1981, and then our next one was in 1991, and then on to 96, 2000, 2002, 2006, 2011, and 12, 13, 14, 16, and then we're going to be having another one coming up in August. That will be the 2017 one. And it's going to be August 4th to the 6th. And you're all invited to be able to come, because we invite all, people that, that have had, experiences with boarding schools or had, parents or grandparents that went to boarding schools. We invite those people and bring their grandchildren, and to be part of our gatherings. So there's, the other gatherings that we've had, and there's all group pictures of all of us, former students. And these are our former students. We're starting to starting to gather, to start having meetings and planning, for how we're going to get funded, so we can continue on with our gatherings. And I'm kind of one of the students there. That's part of that that group. That's we call them the children of Shinwak Association. That's what we called ourselves. And here's a group picture of some of the students that possibly, were helping us to make things move forward. And then over, to the right-hand side is our memorial, for all students all across Canada, and also we included all boarding schools in this continent of the northern continent. And this is the award that we received, and I was president at that time, when we received that award, and it was just a real nice way for the city to be able to be awarded, that because we were just bringing back a lot of the stories, of our former students at that time. And here's another group of young children, and some of those children that that we kind of put a yellow mark on them. They're over on the right-hand side. Cecil, Rod, and Angus Embram. They were one of the former students of this school at that time, and they went here also. So you could see their faces, and they all look similar to to some of the kids that went to this school also then too. And when we got done with our gatherings, we always did our goodbyes by making a big circle to make us stronger, to continue on with our educating, our what happened at the boarding schools. And it was just one good way to be able to continue on, and it made us even stronger when we did that, to gather in a circle like we did. And this is a spiritual picture of one of the former students that went to that school, and on the front part of this picture represents the former students. And then the former student turned into like a grandmother or a grandfather, and but the spirits right behind the grandmother and grandfather are still there with us, and these are the ones that have passed on, and they're guiding us and giving us the word to be able to continue on with our gatherings. And so this is what this picture means. It means to our school. The Shinwak Indian Residential School. And this picture of this is the children of Shinwak is kind of our logo, for all our gatherings, and most of our gatherings has this picture. And every time we have a gathering, this is put on there, and it represents how the eagle has been part of us when we were going to school there, and how our elders down below is a person there, and he's lifting up his pipe to give us strength to keep moving towards the real story, to be brought forward and not hidden anymore. And all the students are down in the bottom, and it's got two pine trees on each end to represent, the chiefs that were there at that time, and earlier in the 1800s to start up the school, and so that they're involved, and then also, and all the medicine wheel is down, down by the arm of that person, that grandfather that's lifting up his pipe, and then the sun, of course, is giving us a lot of good energy, to continue on. Then also all our spiritual ancestors, those little to the left and to the right, our ancestor spirits are there, and the eagles are holding them up, to be able to continue on with our stories and be able to stay strong, and so we can share, the story of our people, that what happened to them, at that school. And of course, a lot of the kids all across Canada, there was a lot of sexual abuse, like I said, and the and of course, we had to go through like a whole system where we had to go to court, to sue the Canadian government, for what happened, at those schools, and a lot of us were compensated, at that time, after the hearings were all settled, and of course they knew that there was a lot of sexual abuse, because a lot of the students came forward and told their story of the abuse that they received, when they were at that school, and that school that I went to, the Shinwalk, was good and it was bad, and it in a way I felt like that I had learned something that I would have never learned if I had stayed back home, and I would never learn to speak the English language, and then of course I still speak speak my Cree language, and and that's because I was a little bit older. I was about 8 years old, and I was already pretty much learned my culture, and I still I would go back home in the summertime, for June and part of June and July and a little bit part of August. We would go home. Then we'd have to go back, when school would begin in September, and we would stay there, for the whole year. And I was there for 13 years at that school, and did a lot of different things with the people that that I had to learn from, the teachers, and I had good relationship with a lot of my teachers because I was eager to learn the language, the English language, and one of the schools that I went to when I got to high school, she was a real good English teacher, and I think she was offended of the different things that she heard about Native people, and then I told her, I said, I can speak my language, and so she said, well, I'm going to be, you guys are going to be doing speeches, she said, as part of your class, and so I said, would that be okay if I wrote my my report or my speech in in English, and then translate it over to the Cree language, and I'll be able to give it both ways. And my English teacher said, by all means. And when the principal knew this is what I was going to be doing, they had the whole school from 9th grade up to 12th grade come to the auditorium and listen to me speak in the, first I spoke in the English language, and then I switched over, to the Cree language, and they said, we had no idea, that you were able to speak that, your language. I thought you had forgotten it, like many of the other students that came through here, they were not able to speak the language. And but most of us that came up from the northern Quebec and northern Ontario area, we, I think a lot of us, we still speak the language. We still speak the, the Cree language, because a lot of the Crees on the east side and the west side, we speak to each other in the language when we get together. And so it just goes to show that, that if you stay strong and pray to the Creator and be part of your grandparents and think about them and translate everything into your language when it was being brought to you. And that's what I did. And it was just so hard. And I was just so slow, because a lot of the words in English, there was no Cree word half the time. So I had to kind of make up a few words every once in a while to kind of make it, sound, the way it's supposed to sound. So our language is so descriptive in many ways, because it describes everything that's around you. and the spirit of that language, it's just so important, to our people, because that's the way the Creator, that's what the Creator gave us, to be able to speak that language that's so important to us as a people. Because if we don't have a language, where's your culture? Culture is going to be lost along the way, and if you don't have your language. And I say, go to the language camps, because we're going to be doing all kinds of language camps. There at Manistee, down up the Odawa tribe at the Bishabi town, and I'm going to be going down to the Pokagon, and then also to the Gun Lake area. I'm down there teaching about the cultural ways also then too, and I just love it to be able to be the grandmother, in those villages, that I just love, and the kids are just so eager to learn all about, the cultural ways, that's been lost here along the way, because when we bring those cultures back to the community, the language comes right in, and that's so important. Okay, miigwech for listening.
Miigwech, Daisy, and one more round of applause for Daisy, as that took a lot of courage, and for her to talk about that story. We do really appreciate that. Well, again, one more round of applause for all of our speakers today. We appreciate each and every one of them, too.